It was one of those early Saturday afternoons when the sun hangs lazily over the cul-de-sac, and the whole neighborhood seems to shimmer in quiet domesticity. The kind of day when sprinklers hiss softly on manicured lawns, children ride bikes in lazy circles, and the world feels slow and predictable. I had just returned from my weekly grocery trip, an errand that had turned into a therapeutic ritual. My SUV was packed with neatly organized bags filled with fresh produce, a week's worth of dinner ingredients, and a few indulgences I rarely allowed myself: a pint of Rocky Road ice cream, a box of imported chocolates, and a bottle of dark roast cold brew that had been calling my name since I passed it in aisle 3. I parked neatly in my driveway, humming quietly, ready to unpack and enjoy a peaceful afternoon. That was when I saw her, Karen, marching toward me with that unmistakable posture of indignation she seemed to have perfected over years of policing the neighborhood. Her son, a lanky kid named Bradley, who was probably 10 or 11, trailed a few paces behind, his eyes darting curiously to the grocery bags in my open trunk. I hadn't even closed my car door before Karen called out, "Oh, I see you finally decided to contribute to the community." Her tone carried that peculiar mix of sarcasm and authority she used whenever she felt entitled to inspect someone else's business. I forced a polite smile, ignoring the jab, and began unloading the first few bags. "Afternoon, Karen," I said evenly. "Just doing some grocery shopping." She crossed her arms, peering into my trunk like she was performing a neighborhood inspection. "Must be nice to have the time for that. Some of us are trying to organize next week's HOA cleanup. You'd know if you ever showed up." I bit back a sigh, reminding myself that engaging was never worth it. Karen had a talent for turning any interaction into a confrontation. Before I could respond, I heard the rustle of plastic and turned to find Bradley with his hand deep in one of my grocery bags, triumphantly pulling out a box of Cinnamon Crunch cereal. "Hey, kiddo," I said gently but firmly. "That's mine. Could you put it back, please?" Bradley frowned, clutching the box to his chest. "Mom, I want this one. You never buy the good cereal." Karen barely glanced at him before glaring at me. "Oh, don't make a scene. He's just a kid. He can have a box of cereal. It's not the end of the world." I blinked, not sure I heard her right. "Excuse me? This is my grocery haul. I just paid for that." Karen waved a dismissive hand as though ownership were a flexible concept. "And? He's hungry." It's a neighborly thing to do, sharing. You could stand to learn some generosity. You live in our community, remember? I laughed lightly, trying to diffuse the situation. Generosity is one thing, but letting your kid take my groceries isn't exactly neighborly, it's theft. Her expression hardened instantly, the kind of indignant, offended look that screamed, "How dare you contradict me?" Theft. Really? "Are you calling my son a thief?" she barked, her voice rising enough to make a few curtains in nearby houses twitch. "You've got a lot of nerve talking like that. He's just a child." Bradley looked between us, clearly unsure whether to feel guilty or defiant. "Mom, can I keep it or not?" he asked, shaking the box impatiently. Karen snapped, "Of course, sweetheart. Don't let people like him tell you otherwise. Some folks just don't understand community spirit." At that point, I knew where this was heading, but I wasn't in the mood to play along. I stepped closer, gently taking the cereal box from Bradley's hands and placing it back in the bag. "Sorry, bud. Maybe next time ask before you grab something, okay?" Karen's jaw dropped. "You did not just snatch that from my son," she shouted, her voice now echoing across the cul-de-sac. "You put your hands on him." "I took the box he took from me. That's all." But Karen wasn't listening. She was in full performance mode now, gesturing dramatically with one hand while the other clutched her phone. "This is unbelievable. You think you can just bully my child and act like you own the neighborhood? I've had enough of your attitude." "Karen," I said, still keeping my tone even, "all I did was ask your son not to take my food. Please don't make this into something it's not." "Oh, I'm making it into something?" she sneered. "You just assaulted a child. You can't just go around grabbing things out of kids' hands. You'll be lucky if I don't press charges." I stared at her, momentarily speechless. "Press charges? For what? Exactly reclaiming my cereal." That was apparently the wrong thing to say, because she gasped as if I'd cursed at her and immediately started dialing. "Yes, hello. she said into her phone, her voice dripping with theatrical urgency. "This is Karen Willis from Maplewood Estates. I'd like to report an assault. Yes, assault. My neighbor just attacked my son and threatened us over groceries." I couldn't help it. I laughed. It wasn't a loud laugh, but a quiet, disbelieving chuckle that only made her more furious. "Are you laughing right now? This is not funny," she snapped. "The police are on their way and we'll see how funny it is then." By now, a few of the other neighbors had peeked out their doors, curious about the commotion. I caught Mrs. Porter from 2 houses down, peering through her blinds, her expression a mixture of concern and fascination. The Johnson twins had stopped their bikes at the end of my driveway, whispering to each other like they were watching a live episode of some suburban reality show. Karen continued her exaggerated phone call, adding unnecessary drama. "Yes, he's a large man, very aggressive-looking. My son's terrified," she said, conveniently ignoring the fact that Bradley was now sitting on the curb, lazily scrolling through a game on his phone, completely unfazed. When she hung up, she pointed at me like a courtroom prosecutor. "You're in big trouble, mister. When the cops get here, I'm pressing charges for harassment and child endangerment. You people think you can just ignore the rules around here, but I run this HOA. We have standards." I sighed, finally setting down the last of my bags. "Karen, please. You're overreacting. You called the police because your kid couldn't take my cereal. How do you think that's going to sound?" "It'll sound like the truth," she shot back. "And when the officers hear how you yelled at my son, they'll take it very seriously. Maybe they'll even fine you for your behavior." I almost wanted to see how far she'd take it. It wasn't the first time she tried to bully neighbors using her self-appointed HOA authority. She'd fine Mrs. Porter for having the wrong shade of mailbox, complained to the city about the Smiths' offensive holiday decorations, and once tried to stop a teenage girl from mowing lawns for pocket money because it violated community business rules. Everyone in the neighborhood knew Karen thrived on control. But today she had no idea that she'd chosen the worst possible person to pick a fight with. Still, I decided not to reveal that just yet. Let her dig her own hole. I leaned casually against my car and checked my watch, calm as ever. "Well, Karen," I said lightly, "if you've called the cops, I guess we'll just wait for them. Shouldn't be long." Her confidence wavered for a second at my relaxed tone, but she quickly recovered. "Good. I want them to come. It's time someone taught you your place around here. You may live here, but this is my neighborhood." Her son piped up without looking up from his phone. "Mom, can we go? I'm bored," she snapped. "Quiet, Bradley. This is important. You need to see what happens when people think they're above the rules." I couldn't help but grin slightly at that, thinking how ironic her words would soon sound. The warm breeze carried the faint sound of sirens in the distance, a sound that made Karen stand taller, certain that justice was about to arrive in her favor. I just waited quietly, arms crossed, letting her bask in her illusion of authority for a few final moments. The grocery showdown had begun, but she had no idea that when those police cars pulled up, this little suburban drama would take a turn she would never forget. The faint wail of sirens grew louder as they approached our quiet cul-de-sac, bouncing off the neatly painted houses and manicured lawns that had always seemed far too calm for real drama. Karen straightened her posture, smoothing the front of her pastel cardigan as though preparing for a red carpet appearance, her face locked in an expression of smug vindication. "Finally," she muttered under her breath, "some authority around here." Bradley, meanwhile, groaned and tugged at her sleeve. "Mom, are they really coming? I didn't even want that cereal that bad." She hushed him sharply, whispering, "This is about principle, sweetheart. People need to learn boundaries." I leaned against the rear of my SUV, arms crossed, watching her like someone waiting for the end of a long, predictable play. 2 patrol cars rolled up slowly, their lights flashing gently but sirens now silent. The neighbors who had been peeking through blinds began to drift outside, pretending to check mailboxes or trim hedges, though everyone knew they just wanted front-row seats. Mrs. Porter stepped onto her porch, clutching her teacup. The Johnson twins had parked their bikes right at the edge of the driveway, whispering animatedly about who they thought would get arrested. When the first officer stepped out, a tall man named Officer Reyes, who had served under me for nearly 8 years, he wore that professional neutrality officers adopt before they know what kind of situation they're walking into. Behind him came Officer Daniels, a younger recruit I'd personally mentored last year. They looked around the peaceful neighborhood, clearly trying to figure out why a supposed assault warranted 2 units. Karen wasted no time marching toward them, pointing dramatically at me like a lawyer in the final act of a courtroom thriller. "Officers! Over here!" she called, her voice dripping with righteous outrage. "That's him, the man who attacked my son." Reyes exchanged a quick look with Daniels, then back at me. Recognition flickered across his face, but he masked it instantly, keeping the protocol. "Ma'am," he said calmly, "can you tell me exactly what happened?" Karen drew in a deep breath, clearly relishing the attention. "Yes, I was standing right here, minding my own business, when this man," she jabbed her finger toward me, "started yelling at my son for no reason. My poor boy was just curious, and this man ripped a box of cereal out of his hands and threatened him. I was terrified. We both were." Her voice cracked at the word terrified, though Bradley, sitting on the curb, was now drawing shapes in the dust with a stick, looking anything but traumatized. Reyes nodded patiently. "And this happened when?" "Just a few minutes ago," she exclaimed. "I called immediately. I told dispatch we needed someone here before things got worse. He was aggressive and, well, just look at him." She gestured toward me again, expecting the officers to immediately cuff me. Reyes turned to me then, expression unreadable. "Sir, what's your side of the story?" I smiled slightly. "Pretty simple, officer. I was unloading groceries when her son helped himself to one of my bags. I asked politely for him to return it, and when he didn't, I took it back. That's the extent of our incident." Karen gasped theatrically. "He's lying. He's just trying to make himself look innocent. You have to do something about this. He can't treat people this way." Reyes looked from her to me again, then asked, "Did any physical contact occur between you and the child?" "No," I replied calmly. "I took the box from his hands, never touched him." Reyes made a note on his pad. Daniels, meanwhile, had wandered over to Bradley. "Hey, bud," he said kindly, crouching down. "You okay? Can you tell me what happened?" Bradley shrugged, eyes still on his stick drawings. "I just grabbed some cereal. Mom said I could. Then he took it back. That's it." Daniels blinked, then stood and gave Reyes a subtle nod that said, "Yeah, this is nothing." But Karen wasn't done performing. "Officer, this man is always causing trouble. He ignores HOA regulations, doesn't attend meetings, and thinks he's above the rules. I told you he's got an attitude problem." Reyes lifted his gaze from his notebook and said in a carefully neutral tone, "Ma'am, HOA disagreements aren't a law enforcement matter. We're just here to address what was reported." Her face twisted. "So you're not going to arrest him? You're just going to let him get away with bullying my child?" Reyes hesitated, probably trying to decide how much longer to let this play out before looking to me for help. I decided that was my cue. I straightened up from where I'd been leaning and said, "Officer Reyes, Officer Daniels, thank you for responding so quickly. I know dispatch probably didn't tell you who made the call." Karen squinted, confused by my calm tone. "Oh, what? Now you're pretending to know the police?" she said mockingly. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my badge, holding it up for her to see. "Actually, I don't just know them," I said evenly. "I'm Chief Donovan. These are my officers." The world seemed to freeze for a beat. Karen's expression shifted from confusion to dawning horror, her mouth opening slightly but no words forming. Reyes gave me a faint, almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement, the corners of his mouth twitching in what might have been amusement. Daniels looked down at the ground, clearly trying not to laugh. The neighbors, realizing what was happening, started whispering furiously. Mrs. Porter gasped so loudly it was almost comical. Karen's voice, when it finally returned, was small and shaky. You're the chief?" "Yes, ma'am," I said, slipping the badge back into my pocket. "Chief of the Maplewood Police Department. And I believe you just made a false emergency report." Color drained from her face. "No, I didn't know. I thought," she stammered helplessly, eyes darting to the officers as if they might save her. He took the cereal and Reyes cleared his throat gently. Ma'am, it's generally not advisable to call 911 over neighborhood disputes, especially when there's no threat or injury involved. Misusing emergency services can be considered an offense. Karen's jaw trembled. I didn't mean to misuse anything. I just thought Daniels added politely, "We understand. But next time, it might be best to handle things through conversation instead of emergency response." At this point, I felt almost sorry for her. Almost. She looked deflated, clutching her cardigan like it was a life preserver. Bradley stood up, brushing dirt from his knees, and muttered, "Mom, can we go now? This is embarrassing." That seemed to sting her more than anything else. She turned to him, whispering sharply, "Get in the house." He didn't argue. He just trudged up the driveway, cereal forgotten, leaving his mother standing there under the weight of a dozen watching neighbors and 2 officers who were clearly done with her nonsense. I decided to let her off gently. "Karen," I said, keeping my voice calm but firm. "Look, I understand that you're protective of your son. But next time, just talk to your neighbors before calling in the cavalry. We've all got better things to do than mediate serial disputes." Her eyes glistened slightly, whether from embarrassment or anger, I couldn't tell. I didn't know who you were," she murmured. I smiled faintly. "It shouldn't matter who I am. Just treat people with respect. That usually works out better." Reyes and Daniels gave polite nods before heading back to their patrol cars. As they left, Reyes called out lightly, "See you Monday, Chief." That single line made Karen flinch again, realizing everyone had just witnessed her trying to have the local police chief arrested over a box of cereal. When the cruisers drove off and the last neighbor retreated indoors, Karen stood frozen in place, her expression a mixture of disbelief and humiliation. Finally, she whispered, "I'm sorry," barely audible, before turning and walking briskly to her house. For weeks afterward, the neighborhood buzzed with quiet retellings of the great grocery showdown. I didn't have to say a word. The story carried itself. At the next HOA meeting, yes, the one Karen usually dominated, she was notably subdued, her once commanding voice replaced by a careful politeness that bordered on shy. She even offered to bring snacks for everyone, which amusingly included a giant bowl of Cinnamon Crunch cereal. When she handed me a small box afterward, smiling awkwardly, I accepted it with a nod. Maybe she had learned a lesson that day about humility, respect, and picking the right battles. As for me, every time I pull into my driveway now, I still think of that afternoon, the sun, the groceries, the ridiculousness of it all, and can't help but smile. After all, not every day does a simple grocery run end with a live HOA drama, and an unexpected reminder of how power and pride can turn something as ordinary as cereal into a full-blown neighborhood spectacle.